Hello and welcome everybody to Birth and Baby Talk. And we have a wonderful returning guest today. May I introduce to you Cree Lambeck from Cherry Tree Counseling in Dundas. Hi, Cree.
Hi, Leanne.
Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for inviting me back and all the nice things you've been saying.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Flattered to be here with you again.
Well, honestly, your last episode that you did with us was very popular. And this is such an important topic. We knew we wanted to have you back again to discuss postpartum mood disorders. And specifically today, we're going to talk about, recognizing them and knowing trying to sift through what it is that is the thing that you should be prompting maybe a call or a visit with your care provider, or looking straight towards connecting with a therapist to get some help.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important topic for sure. So let's unpack some of that and get really clear about what to look for, what the signs are. Last time I was here, we were chatting about how to find a perinatal therapist.
Yeah.
And then today we're going to focus on, well, how do I know I might need one, or somebody close to me might need one? What should I know? What should I be watching for? Right. And then where to find help and what to do. So we can look at all of that today. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Such an important topic. Right?
Yes. And, as a new parent, especially when you're a first-time parent. So when you're a first-time parent, there's so much unknown going on. Everything is really new. And I always liken the experience of becoming a new parent to culture shock, like a really profound culture shock, because you've been living a life that you're very familiar with, and you are probably 75 to 90% awesome at accomplishing. We are used to, modern women especially are used to being masters of their particular area of expertise. And then we have a baby, and babies don't come with instruction manuals. No matter how many classes you take or books you do read, they are unpredictable, and it's very hard to get accurate feedback from them. Situations you can't say to a baby, okay, now that I fed you, is that enough? Have we covered your needs? And they can't quite tell us until they realize a need comes up, and then they just kind of squall. So this can be extremely overwhelming and stressful for new parents. And in addition, it's hard sometimes to understand what's normal, what is the things I'm supposed to be going through, and what's outside of the range of normal, or starting to get towards that wall, so that we know maybe we should take some very deliberate steps to help ourselves or get help for ourselves before it becomes a much bigger issue. So, you're not sleeping regularly, you're sleeping in microbursts. You maybe are not eating on a regular basis. You might be grazing all day as you have a moment to eat, or you might, instead of eating 2 solid meals and a snack somewhere, you might be eating only 1 substantial meal and a number of small snacks, which can, that can mess up your blood sugar a little, which can affect your mood. There is, of course, the constant contact with an infant, which has some really joyful moments, and a lot of times is surprisingly anxiety provoking when you have a tiny baby who's been touching you a lot and crying a lot, and which are both normal things. But so it's easy to start thinking, gosh, I'm really fatigued all the time. I just feel like this weight is draining me all the time. And of course it is, because I'm not sleeping well and I'm very, very busy. It's easy to think, oh, my emotions are all over the place. I have really extreme reactions to things. Of course it is, because this is also overwhelming for me. And, some of that is normal. It is normal to have extreme emotions from time to time. But at what point are we starting to go, wait a minute, maybe we should step back for a moment and have a look at things?
Yeah, great questions, really great questions. And if only they came with a manual, right? We say that all the time, but it really would be very helpful. But we can break some of that down, right? Those warning signs are so important to know about, to learn about, not just for what the woman herself or mom, right? But also for people around us, because we might not really have a good read on how we're doing. Sometimes we're struggling and suffering and we're not even aware of the extent of that. So this is good knowledge for everybody. So some of those warning signs, we can look at sort of how to distinguish between the baby blues, right, which lots of us, of course, have heard about, and something more serious going on, like a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, right? So just a reminder, the baby blues, which affect about 85% of women, right, or moms in the postpartum period, they start around day 2. Day 3 is what most women report, right? And that corresponds with a massive hormone crash, right? So our progesterone or estrogen levels are going way, way down, and that's creating a lot of changes in our body, in our system, and in our mood as well.
Yeah.
So the baby blues are really, really common, experienced by most new moms, and can look like a lot of those symptoms that you described, right? So tearfulness, fatigue, adjusting to this massive life event. Our emotions can change really quickly. One moment we may be feeling really proud and quite joyful, right? And bonding with baby well. And the next moment we may really feel like we're failing or messing up, or we don't know what we're doing, right? Lots of those changes and fluctuations we might be noticing. We might not be taking care of ourselves, right? Or eating or sleeping as well as we would like to, or that would be helpful, right? We might have lots of tearfulness happening too. All of this is a really common experience. And then as we approach around the 2-week mark, that's when our hormones generally start to stabilize and we start to feel better. It doesn't mean we're not still tired or tearful or overwhelmed at times, but it means we're starting to feel a little bit better as we're moving forward, right? You're starting to come out of that and kind of find our emotional balance, right? So a big warning sign here is sort of keeping an eye on some of those very common general symptoms in that first couple of weeks, and then noticing what happens. Are things sort of starting to stabilize and get better, or is the intensity and the duration really escalating, right? Are things getting worse rather than getting better? And if so, around that 2 or even 3-week mark, we notice that we're feeling really overwhelmed. We're having trouble, perhaps, bonding with baby. We're really fatigued to the point where even if baby's sleeping or there's sort of someone to care for baby, we can't sleep, right? Even when we have sort of a restful environment and nice bed and baby's taken care of, right? If our nervous system is so hyper aroused and hyper vigilant and activated that we can't drop off into that relaxing sleep, right? That's something to really pay attention to as well. And we may be feeling sad or hopeless. So these are big symptoms that we want to pay attention to as well. We may be experiencing intrusive thoughts, right? Or even suicidal thoughts, right? And things are just feeling incredibly hopeless and heavy. We're crying almost all the time. We're having those massive mood fluctuations. So these are some pretty clear warning signs that we should really just get a screening, get an assessment, right? And it can't hurt to have an assessment and know where we stand, right? But in order to do that, we have to tell somebody. And we also have to know ourselves. So a lot of women who come to me, who I work with, it's their partner who's urged them to come, right? And sometimes partner or loved ones close to us say, this is kind of what I'm noticing. I don't know if everything's okay or not. Let's check in with somebody, right? And that screening and assessment can't hurt. And then if we do identify that something more serious or severe is going on, then we have readily available treatment.
Yes, absolutely. And I like how you, as you were sort of talking through some of those symptoms, I like how you sort of started out with some of the smaller symptoms that are going to be super, super common for people, and then worked up to some of the bigger and truly scary symptoms that are much rarer on overall
Yeah. So whereas we said, baby blues impacts or affects about 85% of moms, postpartum mood or anxiety disorders, whether that's postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety or stress or all of that combined, is
Mhm.
around 20%. Now that number could be higher, right? Because that's what we know, that's what's reported and diagnosed. And we know so many women suffer alone or in silence and unfortunately don't get the treatment that would be really helpful. Right.
Mhm.
So that's sort of breaks down to about 1 in 5.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And that's a huge amount. So if you look at, if you look around at your friend group, if you've
Mhm.
got 5 friends, at least one of them has or is experiencing a significant mood disorder and, in the postpartum
Yeah.
context.
Absolutely. It's really common. And so we understand that so many women are experiencing the same thing. And there's lots of supports available now that weren't even necessarily there. Would you agree, Leanne, like 5 years
Yeah.
ago? Right? Or going back. And these supports exist now, and these screening measures and treatments are out there and available for us, right? But one thing we run into a lot is, women want to hear that what they're experiencing is normal and okay, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we want our concerns to be heard and validated, but we also want to get that message back that treatment isn't required or that everything's fine. And so sometimes really well-meaning people in our lives, well-intentioned family or friends, loved ones, or even care providers, right? Sometimes women talk about an experience where their concerns are glossed over or minimized, right? And we're sort of told and fed back, well, that's normal. Of course you're tired. Of course
Yeah.
you're tearful. Of course you're overwhelmed. Right?
Yes.
Because it's so common to feel this way. We've just gone through one of life's most massive and profound adjustments, right? Of course, we would feel this way. And some women experience sort of a sense of, well, that's not quite all of it,
Yeah.
or there's something more here, but it can be really hard to voice that concern,
For sure.
particularly when everyone is reassuring us, it's fine, you're fine, you're fine.
Yeah,
Right?
because I think what a lot of us, like at the friends and family on the outside of the experience, I think a lot of us care so deeply for our loved one that we see who may be experiencing these things and is opening up about them, maybe just a little bit, maybe just taking a peek in, and I think our urge is we want to comfort them. We want to let them know that they're not bad, right? So you have the postpartum parent who is like going through this and feeling like I'm feeling a lot of like I'm feeling like maybe I don't like my baby very much,
Mhm.
most of the time or a great deal of the time. I don't like this. Maybe I'm feeling like I've made a terrible mistake and now I
Mhm.
feel trapped
Mhm.
because I'm so unhappy in general overall. And of course,
Mhm.
I would want that person to feel like it's okay to feel that, first of all, because it's common to
Mhm.
feel those kinds of symptoms,
Mhm.
right? And I think people mistake common for normal. So they say it's normal. It's normal to go through this because it is common to go through this.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily normal to feel yucky all the time.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we want you to also know that you're not a bad person for not loving your baby
Yeah,
every moment of every night
of
and every
course.
day, right? So,
Absolutely.
and I think
Absolutely.
that's the hardest thing, like from someone on the outside to provide support is, yeah, we inadvertently minimize what's going on with
Mhm.
people and inadvertently steer them away from getting help
Yeah.
because we are trying to let them know
Mhm.
it's all right, you're not a bad person, and it's all right because it happens to so many people
Mhm.
that it is a common occurrence
Mhm.
and within the realm of sort of the normal aspect of parenting, but it also doesn't mean that you should
Yeah,
like continue on that
absolutely.
way.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And sometimes women, who are struggling with postpartum depression or anxiety will ask, is this normal or is this symptom normal? And we'll respond, it's normal for someone who's struggling with postpartum depression or anxiety, right? Because it is, but it's not necessarily, it's something that we can help you with and that we can treat. You don't have to feel this bad, because that's the other piece of sort of getting that message back of it's okay, it's all perfectly normal. In some ways, yes, that's validating, but sometimes women also talk about being left with sort of just this feeling of, well, if this is normal, you're telling me this is how it's always going to be, and I actually can't tolerate feeling like this. Right?
Yeah, and that can lead to an increase in those symptoms as well.
Absolutely.
As those parents start to maybe pull back from certain things and reinforce a hard time attaching to their baby, because they're like, if this is what I get with my life, I don't like it, and I'm kind of checking out a little more. Or they turn to destructive habits like, oh, if every day sucks as a new parent, well, maybe every day includes 2 or 3 glasses of wine, or, quite a lot of cannabis or something, so that I can get through, or even like a pint of ice cream every afternoon.
Absolutely.
All of these are self-soothing things that we're trying to do to maybe numb out a lot of those feelings, because people are telling us, yeah, that happens. It's perfectly normal.
Yeah, and if this is every new parent's or new mom's experience, and this is what it is, I'm going to have to cope in some of those ways maybe that you mentioned, for sure. And this is why, books like Karen Kleinman's book, This Isn't What I Expected. This is why those books were written.
Yeah.
Right? Because and part of this conversation today is sort of breaking down some of those myths that are there. We have sometimes these idealized visions of what it will be like on the other side of pregnancy. And as you said in the intro, we can read all the books in the world and try to prepare, and we never really know what it's like, and we can never really preview that for another person. So when we get to that place on the other side, right, it can be a real shock, especially if we're not bonding with baby in the way we hoped, if we're not functioning in the way that we envisioned, right? And so there's lots of good supports out there, for sure, to help us through that. Yeah.
And so let's revisit again. What are some of the things that, if we're experiencing them, we should recognize those as possible red flags that are an indication, not necessarily that something's really wrong with our wiring, but that we should maybe pause and check in as a good, healthy self-care practice?
Absolutely. So if we're noticing around the 2 or 3 week mark, right, post giving birth, that these feelings of constant mood changes, tearfulness, inability to care for ourselves, which might look like eating concerns or sleeping concerns, right? If we're noticing some intrusive thoughts, perhaps suicidal thoughts, if we're feeling constantly overwhelmed, and all of that is surrounded by a sense of hopelessness and sadness, and that's not getting better, it may be likely getting worse. If someone's seeing that in us, or we're noticing that in ourselves, that's a time where it's appropriate to reach out for a conversation, for a screening with a care provider.
Yeah.
Right? So we have the tools to look through those checklists, to measure and to screen for not just postpartum depression and anxiety, but other conditions as well, like postpartum OCD, bipolar, right? And then psychosis as well, which is in a different category and separate from postpartum depression, but is what unfortunately we see show up kind of a lot in mainstream media, and that really scary stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is a rare disorder, but something again that is an emergency situation, and we need to know the signs for as well.
Exactly. And I think, again, one of those problems is because the psychosis, the outcomes of parents who have psychosis is often so extreme and very, very scary, and sometimes horribly catastrophic. It is very easy and splashy to see that stuff in the news. So it catches eyeballs. And I think a lot of women who are experiencing pretty like pretty standard depression and anxiety symptoms, which is, you know, the majority of people or the larger group of people experiencing these symptoms. I think sometimes it can be counterproductive because they worry that that's what's going to happen to them. So, and sometimes the response to that is to hide from it. You know,
Absolutely.
to say like, oh, I'm feeling like these bouts of anger, and I'm having trouble sort of bonding with my baby, and I'm feeling sad and a little hopeless a lot of the times, which, you know, are some of the more common types of symptoms. It's easy to think, my God, am I going to like seriously harm myself or my family?
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to anyone about this because I don't want to get labeled as a crazy person.
Absolutely. And another great book for that is I'm Having Scary Thoughts, right, by Karen Kleiman. So again, those excessive thoughts, intrusive thoughts, scary thoughts, I'm going to harm my baby, are extremely common, right, and largely protective. And as practitioners, sometimes it's actually reassuring to us when we hear that that's reported, because we know that looks closely like depression and anxiety, right? And the nervous system is working, right? Whereas postpartum psychosis, which again is rare, about 1 in 1,000 women will be diagnosed. And the reason it's an emergency situation is there's a lot of distortions going on in our thinking, right? That makes sense to us, but wouldn't to someone else. So there's a lot of strange things going on. There may be some hallucinations, right? Some manic type of symptoms and behavior, some auditory or visual hallucinations. We may hear voices. There may be a sense of someone's trying to tell us to do something, or someone's trying to hurt us or our baby. And generally others close to us will notice there's a lot of bizarre thinking going on, right? That just doesn't make sense, right? So with postpartum depression, anxiety, you know, we might be on our own all day with baby, waiting for our partner to get home, and feel that sense of overwhelm, right? And then we might start worrying or catastrophizing that they've been in an accident, let's say, right? Or something catastrophic is going on, right? This falls under sort of those symptoms we associate with anxiety, right? And with depression, because there's such an overlap there. Postpartum psychosis, right? The thoughts are, you know, somebody's trying to harm me, or somebody's trying to get in and take my baby. You know, the thinking and distortions are a lot more severe, right? And that's why we need immediate support if we're noticing any of that happening. But again, that's rare. And you're right, what you said, you know, a lot of the messages that we get keep women quiet and silence us, right? Either because we have tried to reach out and not had a positive experience from our care provider, because let's face it, not all care providers do have the screening tools, right, that we need or would be helpful. Or because, you know, we've been told, no, this is perfectly fine. Or we stay quiet because we're really scared and fearful around what might happen if we open that door.
And then on the flip side is the idea that, well, if my symptoms don't look like psychosis, then they're not worthy of seeking therapy, looking for a therapeutic pathway of one kind or another, whether that includes medication, includes lifestyle changes, includes additional support, includes behavior therapy. So it can be easy to just say, well, I'm sad sometimes. It seems like a lot, but I mean, I'm not thinking about harming myself or my baby. So I'm probably, nobody's going to want to talk to me about this.
Right. So that's why it's so important to tell somebody what's going on. And if we're not quite ready to reach out ourselves yet, or aren't sure how to do that, right, bringing someone else on board to help us through that process. So the risk factor goes up when postpartum mood or anxiety disorder is present, it's significant or severe, but it's not treated, right? So the risk goes up. Right. Whereas when it's treated and attended to, the risk factor all of our risk factors go down. Right. So even if we're not sure if what we're feeling needs, you know, these symptoms need attention or treatment or not, it doesn't hurt to have a consultation, to get the screening, to know where we stand, right? Because when we do that and we receive the support that we need to feel better, we're going to feel better faster, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes women can struggle and suffer for years, right, before they're able to access the help that they need.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure.
And so reaching out early is really, really important. Even if you're not sure, maybe this is the baby blues. I'm not sure. This seems pretty common. My friends have all experienced the same thing. Even if we're not sure, it's not going to hurt to reach out. And, you know, I have never worked with a woman or mom who wants to be in therapy during that phase of their life, right? The last thing we want to do is take time away to go and get treatment and help and support, right? That's not what we want for ourselves. That's not where we thought we'd be, most likely.
Yeah.
Right? And so it absolutely makes sense that we would resist that and try to soldier on.
Yeah, and absolutely. I'm pretty sure you probably have never had a parent reach out to you to say, I think I'm having some trouble and I really need to talk to someone, and have you go, oh, no, I've heard your story. You're all fine. Like, that's totally normal. You don't need me. So, like, you know, if you're certainly at a point where you're recognizing I'm feeling a little off kilter, then that's enough to warrant looking at things.
Absolutely. It can't hurt.
Yeah. And so tell me about the Edinburgh Scale.
Well, the Edinburgh Scale is one tool that we use as a screening measure, as an assessment to sort of see what the severity of those symptoms look like, right? Where a woman falls and some of the risk factors that may be involved. There's lots of these types of tools, but that's one that's really well known in the field and one that a care provider can give.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
Can women maybe take a first pass at that test themselves, just kind of take their temperature, as it were?
Absolutely. So it is in the public domain, right? So you could just easily Google it, find it, and sometimes partners or other loved ones will be the ones to kind of hunt that down and download it and print it out. It's a quick little scale and assessment. It doesn't take very long to do, and it can give some indicator. Right, of whether another call needs to be made or where we're at, and then we can look at some other measures too.
Excellent.
Yeah. There's also on the Postpartum Support International website a really great tool we use and refer people to quite often, called the Postpartum Pact, and that's sort of a checklist. It's really great for partners or loved ones, sort of some of these warning signs summarized and what to watch for in the postpartum period. And it can be a nice idea even in the third trimester to kind of find that tool, download it, print it out, and just keep it handy. Right. So that if things do look different than we might have expected in those first few days and weeks postpartum, we kind of know what to watch for and have that information at our fingertips. Not a bad idea to have that.
Okay, well, I'm going to get that. I'm going to link that in our newsletter for the week, along with the Edinburgh Scale and to the Kleinman's books that you've recommended.
Fantastic.
So that our listeners can have that at their fingertips. And I also wanted to point out something that I think is probably something that is important on your side as well, is for people to know is, you know, a lot of us think about that newborn period as the incubation period for these mood disorders that can come up, and certainly they usually develop at that time, but they're often, in terms of like diagnosing the whole perinatal spectrum, we consider the whole first year and beyond a bit to be like that the period where we might diagnose, or someone might get diagnosed with a perinatal mood disorder, because it often takes a really long time for us and our loved ones to kind of recognize when there's something kind of simmering, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Right on point. And another really good resource is I have it right beside me right here, the fourth trimester. You probably know that one, Leanne.
Love it.
So you might want to add that one on too. I love that. And it's really great to get in the second and not waiting till the 4th trimester to get, because there's a lot of great info in here too about planning in the 3rd trimester. So the 3rd trimester is a nice time too to be gathering these resources and kind of building that resiliency bank, right? Because that's what we're going to have to draw on in those really challenging postpartum days.
Yeah.
Right. Postpartum period is tough. And sometimes nobody tells us that. There's this sense of, why didn't anyone tell me that there were going to be some really tough times and days? Right.
Yep.
So preparing for that, building that resiliency bank, those coping skills, a supportive circle, community, professional supports, all that good stuff is going to lower our risk factors, right? And minimize our suffering and struggle in those days after baby. Yeah.
Yes. And social supports can be a huge factor as well. And here in the city, we have a wonderful resource in the Crown Point neighborhood where I believe it's midwifery led, talking circles. Yeah. So there are groups and outside of COVID, they get together in person. I believe now there is a video drop-in session. I think it's weekly. I could be wrong. But so there is those supports as well that are popping up, which is pretty amazing around the city. That's
right. And the Crown Point in particular is available for pregnancy as well. It's not just postpartum. So yeah, there's lots of fantastic resources out there and available, but it can be a lot to navigate that, especially if we're waiting until, things are really hard to find the time and energy and resources to do that system navigation piece can be tough. So that's when we can enlist our other supports, right? And do some of this planning during the pregnancy.
Absolutely. Great idea. And these are also things that you can drop into while you're waiting for your more formal diagnosis and or therapeutic process to be happening. Because as we know, I got a wonderful little email response from your office, Cree, that said, we are currently full. And we have a wait list. And that is also something that's happening with all the other care providers who provide the same suite of services, as well as the Women's Health Concerns Clinic out of the St. Joe's complex. So it can, so it's super important to act early on these concerns people have, because there can be, a gap in reporting that you're having some trouble and being able to access the more formal supports that are available. And so tapping into the slightly less formal ones of the group chats and supports, social supports that are available can be really, really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we can really sort of build up those layers of support, right? Our emergency supports, our short-term supports, our longer-term supports, and then those bridging supports while we're waiting or wondering what's going to happen, right? And there's lots of those out there. And again, Postpartum Support International has texting. They have groups too. And those are great for sort of day-to-day help and support, even if we're waiting for a referral to go through.
Okay. I'm just writing it down because we are going to be putting all of this in our newsletter. So if folks are not signed up to our newsletter, we're going to have a link in the comments. Because that's one of the, that's one of the ways we just want to give out some helpful information to people, is through that newsletter. So if you're not on the newsletter and you're watching this, please sign up to the newsletter so you can get that. Those resources are always free through our newsletter. I mean, I don't mean necessarily the end, if you're seeking support, you probably, or therapy, you're going to have to pay for therapy. But I mean, like, the access to that information up front is free for our readers and our watchers here on the show. Do you have any final thoughts for us, Cree?
Well, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here and bring some of this out into the open. Unfortunately, I hear a lot from women that they didn't get the help that they had needed in the way that they needed it when
Yes.
they were suffering the most. And so I think the more we can sort of open this conversation up and talk about what things really look like in the postpartum period, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, and get real about that and share our stories, and then also support and resource and empower each other to
Yeah.
be ready, to know what to look for, and then what to do and ways to support if or when it's needed. I mean, with somebody in our lives, I think that's going to be helpful for all of us. So I am just deeply grateful that you created such an important space here for us to do this and have these types of talks. Thank you.
Well, we're very, very grateful that you've joined us yet again. You are an invaluable resource to us and to our clients and the greater community in the Hamilton area. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And so, folks, thanks very much for dropping in again and spending your time with us. We hope you found this information valuable. Next week, I've forgotten what we're talking about next week. Come back next week, because Birth and Baby Talk aims to be full of practically helpful information for you to make your pregnancy, your birth, and your postpartum experience better. So please come back next week, Wednesday at noon, and we'll be back here again, providing information for you. If you know someone who is pregnant right now or has just had a baby, I hope you can forward this to them, because I'm sure they will find it helpful. Cree, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone.
Take care.